Hello, in this video I'm going to quickly show you how to create a shader for an orange. This is a model that we made previously. We're probably going to upload a short video just quickly going over how we made it. But we'll just get right down to making the shader. So we're using Arnold for Maya. We've got our orange model. We have just a simple HDRI light in the background, and we have some reference. I'm going to be trying to create this sort of like pitted looking effect, and obviously add the color and the various other aspects of what make this orange look realistic. So first thing we're going to want to do is go ahead, create a AI standard surface material. We're then going to go and add some bump mapping. So the way I like to do things is use procedural materials quite a lot of the time, using various different noise maps within Arnold and that sort of thing. So we're going to go ahead and add a bump node. Just put that into our normal camera from the out value, and then we're going to get an AI noise shader and put the color, just the red. We can't put every attribute, but we want the red into the bump map. Then we will go ahead and render that and see what that looks like. Just using the IPR render here so that we can make live changes. If I just change the view here and then maybe increase the scale a little bit, you can now see we're getting some texture there. Scale is probably a little bit too big still, so we're up to something like 7. Okay, and one thing that I think I want to do is just invert this so that we have the detail going in rather than out. So we just put a minus value in there. Okay, so we are getting some bumpiness there, but it's still a little too uniform, I think. So what I can do is go and increase the octaves. That's basically just going to increase the detail of the noise. So we put that up to something like 5. Maybe down to 3. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. Maybe we put that at 2. Okay, that looks good to me. Then next what we're going to do is go ahead and just give it a color. Something like this. That looks close enough to me. And then what I'm going to do next is add a displacement map. Now you don't always have to do this, but I'm going to just because I want to get some of the more like pitted looking effects in the orange, so we can layer up some of the sort of surface texture. So to do that, we're going to just drag this out here, add a displacement shader, plug that in there. And we're going to use a AI cell noise. And just plug the red color into displacement as well. Okay. Let's change these values here to something like 0.2. And then we will change the scale to something like, again, we're going to want this in a minus, something like minus 0.05. Nothing too crazy. Just quite subtle. Then, if we go ahead and just update the IPR render, we probably won't see much of a difference just because of how large the noise is here. So if I go ahead and increase this to something like 8. Okay, you can see now we're getting some extra detail in there on top of our bump map. I'm going to go ahead and turn off auto bump though, because we already have some bump coming in and we don't want that on top of everything else. So if we come back to our render view here, then if we increase the scale to something like 10. Okay, so we're getting some slightly more pitted effects now. Actually, what I might do is leave the auto bump on just because the geometry isn't too high detail, so the displacement map's not making too much of an effect. So I think I will keep it like that, and also maybe just increase the octaves a bit. I'll decrease that back to 1. What I'm kind of trying to do here is just make some small little pits in the model with the displacement map, so we might need to increase the size of this quite a lot, up to something like 15. That's not too bad. And then maybe whenever you're doing anything like this, you normally end up sort of playing around with it until you get something that looks right. That might even be too much still. Let's make 0.015. Okay, yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. I might adjust the color slightly though to make it a bit more red. Maybe a tad bit more. No, that's probably too much. Something like this. So, okay, we'll leave that for the time being, and you can sort of play around with this yourself as well, and sort of try to get more. You know, you could really layer in the effects, have some sort of like slashes and things like that, but just for the purposes of this video, we'll leave that there. That's kind of created the basic surface anyway. Next really important thing, for any time you're doing anything organic like this, like a fruit, is to add some subsurface scattering. So what subsurface scattering is it's like light will go slightly below the surface and just sort of bounce around instead of just bouncing directly off of it. So, you know the way light works, that a light hits something and it bounces off, and that's how sort of we see things, and that's how everything's lit. But with subsurface scattering, and you'll see this in real life, one of the best examples is if you put a torch up to your fingers and you look behind them and you can see that reddish hue, that's subsurface scattering. It's because the light is just going beneath the layers of your skin and sort of bouncing around in there, and you're getting the color of the inside of your fingers, somewhat grimly. And that's you get that with fruit too. You get that with anything that has kind of like a thin surface. You get that with like fabrics, paper, a lot of different things, especially like organic things like fruits, plants, that kind of thing. You see it with leaves all the time. So if we go ahead and take the subsurface, and you really don't need too much of this, we'll put that up to something like 0.1. That might even be too high, but we'll just start there. And then you are going to want to change the subsurface color and the radius. You can see now that our model's gone quite white looking, a bit washed out, and that's because the subsurface color is currently set to white. You're going to normally want to change this to something that's like close to your base color, but maybe a tad bit darker. Maybe if we change this one here to something like this. And then it's subtle as well, and you always catch it straight away, but it's something, if you don't have it, if I change this back to 0, it just adds a very kind of subtle effect. Makes it look a bit more realistic rather than just like perfectly, like a perfect surface, like the light is just literally bouncing off of it, rather than having any of that like subsurface light scattering. And play around with that until you get a value that you like. I might go with something like 0.4 instead. And it'll depend on the object too, maybe 0.3. But yeah, as I said, just play around with that and see what that looks like. Okay, next what I'm going to do is go ahead and add a material for the leftover bit of stem up here. So we'll go ahead and create a new Arnold standard surface. And we'll change that color to something like a green, but definitely not that bright. Not like a neon green. It's very unnatural. To something more like an earthy looking, toned down, kind of darker green. Something like that, maybe a bit darker. Let's tweak that here to get us a bit closer. Maybe something more like that. Okay. What I'll probably do is, and we can make another video about this, is go ahead and actually add some painted texture to this, but for the time being we'll just go ahead and do this procedurally in Maya for a little bit. So that is looking very, very basic. We're going to go ahead and sort of make this look a bit more realistic. So to do that, we're going to add a mixture of things. So we're going to add some specular breakup, just to kind of affect the shininess. That's something that I'll go back to and do on the orange as well, that we haven't done yet. Right now it's all just perfectly shiny, but we want to add some breakup to that. Next, as well. We're going to add some color variation. We can do that to the orange too. All of these things kind of added up make something look a bit more realistic. So I think what I'll do is anytime I'm adding any node, I'll typically add an AI color correct. This just allows you to modify a bit further after you've brought in your file texture or your procedural texture. I'll go ahead and connect that to the base color, and then I think I'll just use an AI noise for the time being to drive the color of this, and then that will change that back to what we had before. But if we just change the color of our inputs here, our colors, and then right now that's not going to really look like much, but if I go ahead and increase the scale, I have to do this a fair few times because it's quite a small object. Just something like 10, you can now see we're getting some color variation. If I increase the octaves so we have a bit more detail, maybe I will adjust the color a little bit, decrease the scale. You'll notice me like messing around with values a lot of the time when we're doing this, and that's just because, you know, this is just part of the course, that's how it works. Anytime you're making something new, unless you've done it a few times, you're always going to want to adjust these things until you get something that you like. So this will probably be the bulk of your time here, just adjusting values until we get something. Okay, so we have a bit more color variation there. I might increase or decrease the scale, sorry, again, back down to like 5. And maybe make this a bit more yellow. Something like that. And also maybe change the base color a bit to something brighter. And slightly darker green there. Okay. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add some specular breakup. So again, I'm just going to add an AI color correct node. I'm going to plug just a red color into the specular roughness, mainly just because that doesn't take an RGB map, doesn't take a full color map. You're just looking for, it just wants values between 0 and 1 basically, black or white, for anything like specular roughness or normal maps, not normal maps, sorry, displacement maps. And then I will also put another AI, in this case I'll use an AI cell noise. We'll go ahead and plug that into the input. Just restart the IPR there. Sometimes that won't always update straight away. Then we will just tweak this a little bit until we have it looking not so perfectly shiny. So if I go ahead and select AI cell noise here, we'll increase the scale somewhat to 5. Okay, it's on the whole looking a lot less shiny now. Maybe if we change that to something like a 6. Okay, so we're getting a little bit of specular breakup now, but we don't want this to be completely shiny, right? This part is probably going to be quite rough. Increase the octaves. I normally like to do that just so it adds more detail. But again, like anytime you're doing any of this, you can really go ahead and layer up these effects with like a composite node or a mix shader to really kind of like increase the customizability rather than just using one cell noise map. Like we could go in here and add a occlusion map or an occlusion node, sorry, to get some darkness in certain areas, and then use that to drive the color in certain parts. You know, you can kind of go crazy with it. Most renderers, or as far as I know, all renderers these days, if you're using Blender, you know, that has a fantastic node graph for shader creation and look development. So does Arnold and Maya. So we will leave that like that for the time being, and then we will come back to our orange shader, and we'll also do the same thing we just did there for the specular breakup. So red into the specular roughness. And then we'll take an AI cell noise and just plug that into the color. Okay, so already it's looking a little less shiny and perfect. So you can see we've got some more diffuse spots and some shinier spots. So if I go ahead and increase this up to like something like 5, you can see, you know, immediately here and here that it doesn't look as perfectly shiny as it did. Oranges, depending on which angle you look at them, they can be quite well, not reflective, but quite shiny. So I don't want these as diffuse as they are. So what I can do is, if we just get a good angle to look at this from, go ahead, and this is why we have the color correct node. I can then take the multiply down a bit, so we bring some of that shininess back. Let me adjust this a bit. But now you can see that it doesn't look perfectly uniformly shiny, which is what we wanted. Because nothing really is like that. You know, there's going to be some sort of specular breakup. In fact, I might put that back up some. To something like that. Okay. What I could also show you is quickly how to layer some of these effects. So right now we just have one AI noise driving our bump and giving us this bumpiness. So what I'll do is go ahead and use the composite node. So if we just pause the IPR render there. You can use a mix shader as well. I personally just prefer to use the composite. I think it's a bit simpler. It is depreciated though. I think they plan on phasing it out, so just bear that in mind. What I'll do is just AI composite. Then we'll take the out color from that. Sorry, the out red from that, and put that into the bump map. Then we will put this in the B section there. And then for the other texture, I'm going to use a file texture this time. We have just a simple image texture here for some scratches. Because looking at our reference here, I can see that there are some sort of like gashes on it. Just little things. So I'm going to quickly grab a material we have. I think this is the one. Yeah, this one. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and put the color in there. And anytime you're taking anything that's going to be used for bump mapping, not normal mapping, but bump mapping, and for specular roughness, specular breakup, you're going to want to change the file node to the color space to raw, and also tick alpha as luminance. And I'd also recommend ignore color space file rules, because otherwise you're going to get an error every time you try to render this with a color space that's not the default sRGB. So we will probably have to tweak this quite a lot, but we'll go ahead and render and then see what we have. So right now it's looking about the same as it was. So this is where the tweaking comes in. In fact, what I'll do as well, just so we can affect the appearance of that particular one, is go ahead and do a color correct. Like, you can really just put these wherever you want. Anytime you're adding anything, I would put a color correct, just because then you can customize that exact input without having to change everything else. So I think I'll just change the repeat UV to something like 3. That's just the amount of times a texture or image repeats over the object. Then we'll come back here, still not quite seeing anything. Go ahead and try increasing the exposure. Ah, there we go. So that looks way too much. This looks more like a basketball now. But now that I've increased the exposure, you can see that you can really see those scratched effects. So we know that it is working. We're going to want to just scale that down quite a bit to maybe something like 1.5. Okay, so that's looking a little bit better. So now you can see that we're getting like the kind of scratches as bump. There might still be a few too many here. It's maybe not the best image textures to use, but you get the point though. Sort of, we can layer up the effect here. So we have the bump coming from the noise, and we also have the bump now coming from these scratches, and they're combining pretty well. And then with the AI color correct nodes, you can really kind of customize each one independently, even though they are both connected to the same input, which is really cool. This is something I just started doing recently as someone that's not too experienced with shader creation. Maybe we'll change this exposure back down to like 1.25 or even just to 1. Then yeah, there we go. Now we're getting a few little scratches in there. And then that's basically how I would go about doing something procedurally like this, you know. So this really was very quick. You know, outside of the scratches, we didn't even use any texture maps. This just has some basic UVs on it. I just auto UV'd it. And we've just thrown some procedural textures on there. And then, you know, this might not work as a super close up object, like a hero object, but for something in the mid-ground to distance, you know, it works pretty well. And, you know, this is just, you know, model didn't take that long at all. Maybe 10-15 minutes, and then textures again, you know, as you can see in this video, it really didn't take very long at all. And then you have an orange. So I'd say go ahead, try out for yourself. The node graph really is very powerful. Once you understand how it works, you can really kind of push this quite far without having to create any texture maps whatsoever. And yeah, try it out. Thanks for watching.